session are Introduction to Asset Management, Need, Benefits and Global Standards, Asset Management Journey, Case Study of an International DISCOM, DISC Oman, Roadmap for Indian DISCOMs as is state to be state for Indian DISCOMs, Implementation Strategy and Plan for Indian DISCOMs. Welcome, sir. And joining the panel, we have Mr. Tiran Fernando, Project Manager, Asset Management, DNV. Welcome, sir.
Hello.
We have Mr. Sainath Bhandakari, Senior Solutions Architect, Public Sector, Amazon Web Services. Welcome, sir. We have with us Mr. Peddy Sumanto, Vice President of Head Office Research Management Development, PLN Distribution Asset Processing, PTPLN Indonesia. Very warm welcome, sir. We have Mr. Ashutosh Sharma, Senior Principal Consultant, Semela DNV Dubai. Welcome, sir. We have with us Mr. Arvind Singh, CEO, TPSODL. Welcome, sir. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over the stage to the chair and moderator of the session, Mr. Marcus Vipio, to take the session forward.
And good morning to all of you. Warm welcome after a wonderful, splendid dinner and a wonderful show here in Odisha. I think it's really enlightening to be here and start the second day. Topic of asset management may not sound so thrilling to you for the morning session and an early start, but we have really gathered a wonderful panel of experts, and you will understand that this is very much a topic which matters for the distribution utilities, and we are very happy to have this morning to introduce that topic to you. Why were we actually working on asset management, and what is our, let's say, mandate? We, GIZ, are the implementing agency of the government of Germany. We have a very long-standing bilateral cooperation with the government of India in the we should look at, and then also in consultation with the Central Electricity Authority, asset management was one of the topics to look at. The reason is also key enablers in the distribution reform program, and of course there is also help from the international side. There is a standard actually on asset management, ISO 55000 family, and that's of course also an excellent help. It's not only for distribution utilities, it's of course for all companies, in particular large companies and large infrastructure companies. We thought exactly in those lines, how can the ISO 55000 family be applied then in distribution utilities? So we will learn a little more about this. We also asked then to get a report done, a study with international best practices, but also an assessment of the situation regarding asset management in the country. So we also surveyed a few distribution utilities in India, and then as a summary of those practices, we also asked them to have a roadmap designed and also to prepare some guidelines for asset management for Indian distribution utilities. And this also now has been finalized. We have a report, and I'd just like to ask my colleagues to bring the report so that we can just have a quick launch of that report. think they're not. So yeah, this report is a summary which has been prepared by DNV as our consultant in close cooperation with the Central Electricity Authority. Unfortunately, nobody could come today from the CEA. Otherwise, we would have loved to do the launch in their presence, but we thought it's a very good occasion to launch this report now. So I ask all the panelists, please, to open. Yeah, we stand for that. Have a nice photo. Thank you very much. And of course, this report will also be made available in the public domain. And yeah, having said that, we would like to set the stage now with a presentation on the ISO standard itself and what it entails. And I'm really happy to have Tiran Fernando with us. He is actually a member of the Technical Committee Working Group for the ISO 55000 standard family. And he will now give us an insight what it is and what it entails. And the floor is yours, Tiran.
Thanks, Marcus. A very good morning to everybody. My name is Tiran Fernando. I represent the International Standards Committee, Technical Committee 251, which is the committee that develops ISO 55000. So as a starting point this morning, I want to ask you all, has anybody heard of ISO 55000 series before this morning? A show of hands, please. Okay, some people. Very good, thanks. So I'll take you through this morning. Presentation ready?
At least it's a nice picture.
That's true. This one. To all the panels and all the comments that were being presented to all of us. And one of the things that really stood out to me was, well, India is going through a change, right? Like every other country. And of course, one can argue that a country will continue to change forever. But of course, with that change, you also need to have structure and planning to make sure that you can have the EV charging networks you want to have. You can have the penetration of renewables into the Indian grid. But to do that, really, you need to move towards having an asset management structure where you are able to understand what grids you have in the grid, what are its capabilities, how far can you push it. So that's where I say, well, long-term grid planning is really needed for the economic growth of India. So a little bit about me. Like I mentioned before, my name is Tiran Fernando. I work for DNV, but I also represent the International Standards Committee. And today I will take you through a bit about the global drivers of asset management. I will take you through how the 55K series has evolved over the last decade plus. And of course, some examples of how utilities use asset management globally for grid planning. So let's talk a little bit about managing assets versus asset management. Now, I don't think I have to talk about managing assets to any one of you. I think you all are experts in managing your own grid. You manage your own assets. So really, most of you have a systematic response to problems and topics that arise in your grid, right? You're able to apply technical solutions to make sure that your grid has the reliability and the availability that you want to have, or at least you plan to have, right? But this approach, what I call the managing assets approach, is really siloed. You are looking at it from asset perspective, not from a grid perspective. And moving towards asset management, right, it's changing also your mindset, changing your organizational strategy to really make sure you get the most value out of your assets, not just optimizing or sub-optimizing at substation level, but optimizing at grid level, right? And also asset management allows you to break down those silos that you and I have all experienced in our organizations. And will these silos disappear forever? No, they will continue to be there, but you have to continue working on breaking down those walls internally. And if I have to summarize what asset management means, it's the coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from its assets. If anybody is interested, I've put a QR code. I don't know if you can scan it. You can come to me later. There's an excellent article published by the committee I sit in that describes the difference between managing assets, which is what we do today in grids, versus asset management. You can find me later if you can't scan the QR code. Right, so a little bit about the global drivers of asset management, right? So predominantly, I work outside of India, in Europe and North America. And I want to give you a view of what utilities are experiencing outside of India and what is driving them. So right now, as you may be aware, there's a war in Ukraine happening, right? So I live in the Netherlands, and that war in Ukraine is affecting us. Gas prices more than tripled over the last year. There is a large push for electrification, so that even increased the speed of which we address the energy transition, right? So we have more, let's say, push from the consumer, from the market to gain more value out of your assets, right? This will, the Ukraine war, we say, will not impact the short-term, let's say, the long-term transition of the energy. Another thing we do is we did a forecast of the 1.5 degrees, the net zero vision we have. The way we go today, if we look at it, actually we will not reach the 1.5 degree target we have. And actually we say by 2100, we will be at 2.2 degrees at global warming, the way we continue today. Okay, that's of course a very high level thing we can all talk about. But one thing that's for sure is that the electricity mix or the energy mix globally is moving towards renewables. And we predict something around 83% penetration by 2050 in the electricity mix from renewables alone. And of course, hydrogen. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, where there's a large discussion around hydrogen. Is hydrogen the way to go? Now, Elon Musk might say something differently, because of course he has his own agenda. But the way we predict it, the way we look at it today, by 2050, only 5% of the energy mix will be in hydrogen stance. But let's zoom a little bit into the final energy mix up to 2050. So this is a forecast that is being done yearly by DNV. If you want this data or these slides, you're more than welcome to have it. Come see me afterwards. But what we see is that in the energy mix, electricity will more than double by 2050, right? And the share of renewables will increase. So what does this mean to asset management? So I'll give you an example. In the Netherlands, there is a large push to get more renewables connected, so upstream and downstream connected. So consumers are waiting now 2+ years in the Netherlands to get a connection. Now, how is asset management helping there? They are able to understand what the risks are. They're able to understand how far can they push their grid, right? And asset management also helps the organization, the board of directors, the CEOs, to say, well, we have to increase our risk appetite. Now that's great, but how do we do that? Right? You need to have a good understanding of your assets, good understanding of your grid, in order to be able to say, well, right now we're loading our transformers at 80%. But in theory, our transformers were actually designed to be able to handle overloading up to 200% one time in its lifetime, 150% 10 times during its lifetime, and they also accepted the fact, well, actually, we're going to push the grid now, and we're going to accept that our transformers will have a lifetime of 18 years. Right? And that was a little bit of a revolutionary thinking from Alliander in this case, where they say, it's okay, we will have to replace them, but right now we will have the extra capacity needed for the grid to make sure our end consumers, you and I in the world, have the electricity to charge our cars, charge the telephones we have, and all our devices. So that's just to give you the global view, right? And let's dive a little bit deeper into ISO 55K Technical Committee 251. Now, just to give you an overview, we have 6 standards that are published under the direct responsibility of TC251. Right now, we have 5 standards that are under development. I will go into detail of what these standards are. We have 35 participating members globally. So I put the countries down below for you to have a look. What you see is in the committee, India is not being represented. So I would also love to see in the international committee one of the utilities from India or DISCOMs participating here. And we have around 21 observing members globally. And the countries that are the most active are the Netherlands, Australia, and Canada. And the other countries are of course active, but there's a large gathering from Australia, Canada, and the Netherlands. And I'll tell you the reason why. All those countries are driven by the regulator to be 55K certified. And they realize, well, if we have to be certified, we also have to be on top of the standard. We also have to provide our own input to make sure that our requirements are being captured in a way that we can also implement it, so that the standard is not at a level where it's unattainable. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the evolution of the 55K standard. Somewhere in the 1990s, oil and gas employees or engineers decided we need to get together, develop quality management standards. So I'm talking ISO 9000. Now those same engineers were meeting regularly and they realized the quality management standard doesn't actually include risk in its, let's say, the standard. They decided we have to do something about this. So they formed what's called the Institute of Asset Management somewhere in 2003. And in 2004, they published PAS 55-1, which was published by the British Standards Institution. Now, this was the first version of what we call the 55,000 series. In 2008, the Institute of Asset Management then made a second release. They released 55,000-1 again with a significant change, but they also added 55-2, which was the guidelines for the application of 55-1. This was an important step. And this was not a standard, this was sort of a recommendation from the Institute of Asset Management. But then, in 2014, the International Standards Committee was convinced that this needs to become a standard, and a committee was formed that was called PC 251, and that's called the project committee, and they are erected when they need to develop a brand new standard. So in fact, in 2014, 55,000, 55,001, and 55,002 was released. Now this drove utilities and other organizations globally to say, well, maybe there's some value here. The uptake was slow. But in 2018, the technical committee standards still continued to develop, and they issued 55,002 in, let's say, a second revision. Now, important point came here. As you may all realize, ISO 9000 is not specific to utilities. And it is the same story for 55,000. It's not specific to utilities. All the utilities need to adapt to it, or they had, let's say, given by the regulator. IEC, the Electrotechnical Committee, decided we're going to have a separate committee that takes the 55,000 series and then applies it for utilities. And they called it Management of Network Assets in Power Systems, TC123. Now, they've been developing let's say, 3 standards via IEC. The first standard was released. The second 2 standards are in development. One will be released next year, and the third one in 2024. And of course, in 2019, a new edition was made, 55,010. So I'll go a little bit detail into what these standards actually are. So what you see here today are the 4 standards that are fully released in the market and that is being adopted by the industry. 55,000 itself gives you an overview, gives you the principles and the terminology needed for asset management. And currently, it's under revision. We are at committee draft 2. Right, so which means somewhere in the next 2 years, a new revision will be made to 55,000. 55,001, which is the committee I'm working on. So I'm in TC251, but I'm in work group 6, which is, let's say, erected to revise 55,001, which is determining the management system and requirements for asset management in a company. Again, we're also the same stage. We're at committee draft 2. And then we expect to release that in the next 2 years, the next revision. Now, as I mentioned before, 55,002, which is the guidelines for the application of 55,001, has no more projects running. It was recently released, so we say nothing to be done there. And 55,010 was released because we realized all this management frameworks was great, but the alignment between the financial part of the organization and the non-financial part of the organization was completely missing. So it was decided by the committee that we need to develop a new standard addressing this particular topic because, of course, money is required. Cash is king. Without cash, I think most of you will know nothing moves in the world. Now, talking a little bit about the other 3 standards that are being currently developed. 55,011, which is the guidance of development and application of public policy to enable asset management. Now here, we realized most of the companies or organizations that were adopting 55,000 series were utilities, but not really government organizations. And we realized government organizations also have a significant asset base. And we decided, well, we need to address this. We also engaged with countries globally to understand the need for this, and therefore the need for 55,011 was born. The second one, 55,012, I'm sure you all realize we can all sit in a room here, we can talk about asset management, but without the organization behind us, nothing will happen. We have to engage with the people that work in the organization. We also have to make sure they have the right skills, they have the right competencies, they have the right drive to implement the vision that we may come up with. So 55,012 was born. Fast forward a few years later, 55,013. Now, we all talk about assets. When you and I talk about assets, we talk about cables, overhead lines, transformers. Back in the day, we didn't consider data to be an asset. We treated data to be an incoming stream of something on a document. We didn't treat it as an asset. And why was this important? We all talk about, oh, we need more data. What are we going to do with that data? Is it going to be structured? So we decided we also need to treat data like an asset, because actually without data, you can't do anything. But of course, having all the data in the world, you also need to have use cases that allow you to determine what can you do with the data. Just having a bunch of data in a database will get you nowhere. Enough about the standard. I have a couple of questions for the audience here, right? You all work in utilities. Do you recognize some of these questions as CEOs, as directors, as managers? You ask the same questions, right? Who knows the conditions of my old assets? If you ask Tata Power when they took over Odisha, they'll probably tell you, we didn't have all the overview of the assets, right? we might also be asking, what asset data do we need to gather? Yesterday, I heard somebody saying, we need more data. But what data should you be gathering? At what priority? Because you can't gather everything. You have to determine which data parameters do I give priority to. Because time and resource are limited. Another thing that asset management addresses is, how do we make consistent decisions? How do we say that substation A is treated the same way as substation 2? Or to say, should it not be treated the same way as substation 1? All those questions need to be addressed somehow, and that of course needs to come from your strategy on asset management and how you determine risk. I think some of you may recognize this. Today, most utilities, and not just in India by the way, are driven based on issues that come up. They're quite time-based, generic, they're reactive maintenance. Now, as your asset base grows, right, you input more renewables, you have a more dynamic grid, you have load flows that are going both ways, not just one way anymore. You have to understand how to address this. Today, I changed my slide a little bit and I said, well, I'm going to put some red arrows in the middle. Today, your decision making is separated from your data. Your data is separated from your workforce, and also then separated from your grid itself. Right? This is what I call the basis of asset management. And you have to go through this stage to get to what I call the advanced asset management stage, where you start to bring together your data, bring together your workforce, bring together your strategy to understand where do I need to invest money in, whether it be OPEX or CAPEX. And you do this by data, by using your policies. And this is where the structure of asset management really starts to shine. Now, of course, I'm very passionate about 55,000. And one might say, well, that's great for you. But what I have seen is I have worked in utilities in Europe, some parts of Asia, in North America. And the grid is changing. And we can keep saying that the grid is changing, and the grid will keep changing for the next years to come. But what I have seen is that asset management has helped these utilities to make decisions, consistent decisions, to make sure that their consumers have the reliability that they desire and they need. So today, I finish my presentation here, but in the panel discussion, we would also like to hear your thoughts, what you think about asset management. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tiran, for this introductory presentation. Of course, when I see all these different standards and also evolving, first thing is I get scared. Oh God, another bureaucratic monster is coming, and somehow we have to see how to deal with it. And in the end, it's the certificate which counts. That's maybe the first thought. So how do we get that certificate with the least effort or whatever? And of course, that's not the right way to look at it. The path itself actually is the goal. And that is the thing. It's not the certificate which stands at the end of the process, but it's the process itself, where then you learn actually what you haven't done, what you should have done, and what you should not do, etc. All these things come out. Of course, it's also a bit opening a Pandora's box, because you don't know what all will come out of that box, and yes, you will have to deal with it. But the right view on this is you would have to deal with it anyway. And the message which Tiran, I think, also wanted to send across in the beginning is the world of the distribution utilities gets more and more complex. That's for the reasons he stated. And there is no other way. You feel that probably already in your day-to-day operations more and more and more. And yes, why do we need a standard for this? Yeah, because exactly of those complexities, and also because you cannot manage it in let's say, just a day-to-day approach. And for this, you need to see the standard as a help, as a guidance, and something to start with. And once you start it, then of course you need to make the best out of it. So I'm really happy to introduce the next speaker to you. That's Ashutosh from DNV. Huh? What? No. I think he doesn't have a presentation. Yeah, so he will actually show us real cases of the implementation. We had 2 cases in our study. One was from the Netherlands and the other one from Oman. And then, yeah, there you can actually see how an organization actually adopts the process, and also how does it look at the beginning of the exercise, and then also what are the learnings and challenges in between. And I think that's quite interesting. And we're also very happy that later in the panel we also have a representative from Indonesia who is already in the stage of implementing ISO 55000. So later PD will be able to tell us also a little bit about that. Okay, Ashutosh, the floor is yours.
Yeah, namaskar. Good morning. Thank you, Marcus. After going through, is it? Yeah, I will take it up by the time this arrangement is done. I'll take you through the roadmap which we just unveiled, what is therein, what we have done. And basically, I express our thanks for GIZ, because GIZ commissioned DNV to develop this as a collaborative approach. And I will explain you how we have developed it, how we have gone to the grassroots level to understand, because it's not that you just put up a very philosophical document. So I'll take you through the journey of this roadmap. And I'll write to express real thanks who has contributed to this, my colleague Aayog, Kashish, and Sunilji from GIZ. We have been working like a team to develop this, and we also had a feedback from CEA, actually indeed. So this is the journey which we'll take through. I'll just give a short introduction. The need of asset management, I'll not touch upon in detail because my colleague or from ISO, Mr. Tiran, has touched upon, but I will be very specific for Indian needs. And then we'll go through how we have developed it, and what is the roadmap, and some international case studies which is quite similar to, so there is a knowledge and a learning in that. And most important is way forward. So this is the approach which we have adopted for development of the roadmap. So we took 3 steps. Get to know what is the asset management. So we prepared the knowledge base with the assignees, with GIZ. What we are going to discuss about, how it is going to help. So we created a kind of a get to know on asset management process. And we selected 2 DISCOMs internationally, and 2 DISCOMs from India to do a kind of an assessment. The international DISCOMs were the one where DNV has been associated with them for a long journey to develop asset management systems. And then this is the first phase, get to know. Then second was the situational analysis of India, very specific. And I'm based in Dubai, so I have been away from India for quite some time. But because I keep on visiting, so I understand how the electricity behaves in India, to be very frank with you. Because my friends, my colleagues are here. And then we developed the roadmap. So roadmap, we have unveiled it. And this workshop is very important for this roadmap because we had a kind of a panel discussion, so we can also make some notes on this. And if any improvement needed, we can definitely incorporate. So that is. So these are basically contents in the roadmap. The international knowledge is built in, a reference of standards, India-specific needs, and specific requirement needed to implement the asset management. And I assure you, I will not allow you to sleep. I'll possibly make you to some asset management of self-asset management. So what are our assets in the body? Our organs, yeah? So we'll take some analogy to our body and we'll do some kind of that assessment. And then we guide through the Indian DISCOM how it can be implemented, how it can be tailored. And yesterday we have been listening from dignitaries, especially the 4 Ds, if you remember. Quite important. And then how it can affect, we'll try to have a look. So that is our objective. So we'll just let us first establish, is there a need or there is no need? Because it's not that are you managing assets or assets are managing us. So possibly answer lies with you. Whether you are managing assets or assets are managing your time. Are we doing firefighting? If we are doing firefighting, it means assets are managing us. If we are not doing firefighting, it means we are managing the assets. A very simple baseline answer to it. So you can possibly do a kind of introspection and you just say that, okay, I have been woke up by this outage, that outage, or some disturbance, then assets are managing you. So why there is a need of asset management in the Indian scenario? Is there a regulatory need? Because that is the first thing which comes us. If you are driving on a road, I can drive at 140 if I can drive on a 60. So what is the rule there? Yeah? So we have to follow the rules or what are the regulations? So is there a regulatory need for establishing an asset management system in a DISCOM? That's my question to you all. Please raise hands. Is there a regulatory need to establish an asset management in a DISCOM? Please, yeah. So there is a direct need specified in any act or regulatory need that you should have an asset management? If you feel that, I make a reference of 2 points. One is there is a single word in Indian Electricity Act 2003 that all the assets should be optimally utilized. It's a very deep sensing sentence. Optimum utilization. How we can do the optimum utilization, that makes us to a regulatory need, but it's not a direct statement that you have it. It directs you, but indirectly. Yeah? Then there has been a change in just 2 years before, where there's a customer rights or consumer rights has been specified in Indian Electricity Act. It talks about the reliability of a supply, which is basically clearly specifying 24/7 supply, a consumer DISCOM has to provide, and regulators can specify what is the SADI and SAFI. Yeah? So these things are basically set as an indirect for a need for asset management. There is no direct, we couldn't find it actually. If it is there, we'll be very happy to have that. And then DISCOM specific needs, we talked about. Whether it is a sustainability, there are economical factors, and DISCOM specific. I will not state because it has been discussed in yesterday a number of words came up. It can be political, it can be people's need, it can be consumer satisfaction, people satisfaction. So there can be different needs to have the asset management system. So this is an overall broad need assessment. But let us go further down. As Mr. Tiran mentioned in a while ago, there is a very important word there which has been created, creating more value. What does value mean to us? What asset management will bring to DISCOMs is the value. And what is value actually? If we understand that, it will be very easy to understand us what is the need of an asset management. So just give a short thought process what I mean for a value. And here we are talking in asset management because asset management is talked in 2 different ways. One is the financial asset management and second is the management of the assets, physical assets. Here we are talking only about the physical assets. Let us be very clear. ISO 55000 deals with, the first one deals with the physical assets, how to manage the physical assets. It is not talking about the human assets. It is not talking about financially, like if you go to the financial books, okay, what is the asset management? They have a different terminologies. So there are existing challenges. What are the core KPIs? I will not touch upon this. This is there you can possibly refer on. Let us talk about the grassroots. When we did the as-is state to to-be state, it is same as like our own BMI, our own assessment. I know my BMI, that is as-is state, and what is I want to have BMI as a to-be state depends on me. So no one can guide us. You go to the consultant, you go to the doctor, he can just say, your BMI is high, you please take necessary actions to remove it. Same thing applies to DISCOMs. And we cannot manage it, our BMI is because of many reasons. It can be personal, it can be family, and we can't afford it or whatever, yeah? So let us take, what is the present state of DISCOMs? And what are the key factors which we look into when we talk about the asset management? First is the technical solutions. We all engineers, we always try to find it out what is the technical solution of it. You all agree? Second, cost. We have a pressure of the cost. Yesterday I was in a Tata booth in the exhibition, and they were telling that, okay, they are implementing remote monitoring of the primary substations, looking towards the minimum cost solutions, yeah? So we are looking for the minimum cost solutions, but the best technical solutions. Technical solutions can be cost effective or it can be cost, because we specify our functional specifications based on the technical solutions. And cost comes, but functions, features, you keep on adding to it, it will add up the cost. Whether we want to buy Alto or we want to buy the Mercedes. Yeah? It depends on us. And it depends on the pocket which we have. And there is a quality and a performance. These are the two aspects which possibly gets neglected. So what I have indicated, this indication is of a different assessment. We have done an assessment of two DISCOMs. We could find these two different states. So there is a big disparity and diversity, and that is uniqueness of our country. And if you look from this, it varies from DISCOM to DISCOM. Possibly you can do the self-assessment where my DISCOM lies. Whether we are only looking for technical solutions, we look only the cost, but we don't look to the quality, or we look to the performance or not. So these are the key factors. Let us do a simple exercise. What I mean by technical solutions. And it's a real picture. There are many pictures here from different DISCOMs. I don't want to go in all. We'll just take a use case or a very simple case here in the next slide. And you have to tell me where it lies. On the technical solution, on the cost, on the quality and the performance. It relates to something else which we'll talk on the next. Just see this picture, please. Is it a good technical solution? Technically, just technically. Don't look through the risks. Technically, it is working. And I have been seeing this from last 6 years. Technically, it feeds power to the customers. Yeah, very easy. You don't need a... Yesterday we had a very nice video. We really looked to the lineman. You don't need a lineman because I can work from the ground. It's a perfect solution. Yeah? So, and a cost effective might be. It is not to just, it is just for our own introspection, yeah, because we are team here. Yeah, I really appreciate your thoughts here. But it possibly imposes some issues when it comes to the performance, when it comes to the risk, when it is raining, what is the risk to the people. We have been talking about the elephant corridors. If you go to Oman with GPC, they have a camel corridors, like we have been talking about the elephant corridors here, correct? So we also care for, so we take this reference and we'll talk about on asset management. So this establishes a need of an asset management. We have been talking some cases where breaker has been jumped, those cases, yeah? So technically it is fine, it will trip somewhere. If not that, then upstream. So there is always solutions prevailing, and we have been running the grid. And what is the 2B state? 2B state works on three main factors. CPR. We also understand what is CPR on other aspect. When the lineman falls down after electrocution, what we have to do? CPR. But this is the CPR for DISCOMs. Cost, performance, and risk. So this triangle, where you want to take it, and what is, this triangle is the most difficult triangle to match, to keep it in a balanced situation. Balancing the cost, balancing the performance, balancing the risk. The three coordinates of the triangle, and what is in the center is value. I think this triangle makes us very clear on the asset management definition of value. Least cost, we want to shrink this triangle. As much you shrink, value expands. Least cost, high performance, low risk, best asset management. And value is high. Higher value means asset management is in place. And what to be state, there are some good practices. You can see also their best practices workshop. So we are talking about the best practices. So I just put a snapshot of one of the best practice being used for cable fault. But rest of the are blank. It depends from DISCOM to DISCOM. We have been hearing there is no one jacket which can fit to all DISCOMs. So we have to have own assessment that what to be state we want. So from those state coming to this is the management, asset management can help it. If this triangle is not perfect, what happens? That was the perfect BMI triangle. And this is with obesity, and one is possibly he is having the health issues. Yeah? So this triangle, if you want to keep healthy in a DISCOM, it has to be very balanced, and only in that shape you can swirl it. Otherwise not. So that is fundamentals of asset management, and I think it sets up, it is put as a Q&A. Why I put it, there is a reason for it. I'll not go into the illustrative gain of the value. If you just look to the maintenance practices, we increase the value of the asset if we do the regular maintenance. So basically, it is value, and it is just a typical example. I don't want to go into the complete details and all those things. What is the roadmap then? So based on this, after assessment of the need, we created a roadmap. And what roadmap contains? It contains another thing. What should be there in the roadmap? We have a very clear thought on that. There are two important things in a house, H and W. Can you tell me who are those? Husband and wife. But in asset management, there are two, how and why. Yeah? So, it is not going to tell you, it is give the answers why we should do it. It also gives you how we should do it, but at as a grandparent level. Yeah, it is not going to the details that how you can do it, because it is not a, you have to do yourself based on your to-be state vision. And what are the action points, when to act, where to act, because there are 5 Ws and 1 H. So this is the pathway. When we follow the roadmap, the same pathway can be adopted at a country level, it can be adopted at a state level, it can be adopted at a DISCOM level. First thing is, you should be aware. So, like Mr. Tiran mentioned, the awareness of the standards, why we need it, then you should have a consideration, then buy-in in the organization is very much needed, and then you should adopt it and transform. But most important is, it is always a top-down. It converts from philosophy to the practices. So philosophy transformed to policy, policy to procedures, procedures to practices. It talks about the 5 Ps, and the most important 5th P is people. If we can't have buy-in in the organization, it will never work. And it is always so there are different levels specified. And if you look to the level number 2, which talks adopt a basic level of asset management. What is that basic level? It should be there. We are managing our assets, but what is basic level? Let me clarify, let us do a self-check, and possibly that will give you some answers. And it is a 6x6 test. I will need your help. My colleague Aayog will take the snapshot of your answers, and will possibly figure it out where we stand. First question. Just do an introspection. I have a centralized, go by words, centralized data depository of capital assets. Capital assets, what we say is 33 kV and 11 kV, because for DISCOMs we understand LV is a big challenge. So if answer is yes, please raise your hand. You all are from DISCOMs, yeah? So please, Aayog is taking a snapshot and then we'll, so do you have a centralized data depository of capital assets? Please again. Yeah, thank you. And I procure my capital assets following a standardized specification. Yeah, thank you. I install and commission capital assets following my standardized specification. Install. Yeah, thank you. I monitor operational parameters of capital assets. There are a few. I follow standard maintenance plan for capital assets. Standard maintenance plan. I plan and perform replacement, refurbishment, and disposal of capital assets. Thank you. And 7th one. So that was a 6x6 test. You can possibly do this, and if you are at a basic level, then you need to go further. And what is the further? My all activities follow the 4 steps. Plan, perform, check, and correct. If all above activities follow these 4 conceptual points, then you are already on a path of advanced asset management. So I will not ask for this, but possibly you can do some kind of introspection. And you will find in the roadmap all these self-check questions and all these things. I don't want to go in the detail and how much it takes, because I have to go and tell you a showcase of an international case study, which is from Oman actually. And it is quite similar to, especially to Odisha territories. It is Dhofar region. It gets cyclones. It is a coastal. It also have a good vegetation. They have a Kharif season, but they also have a desert part of the country. They started their journey in 2003, and we have been associated with them from around 2007, 2008 from DNV side. And then if you have seen the journey of a PAS 55, it came in 2004, and they started following it. And 2013, they actively considered it, and within 3 years, they could accredit it. But journey took little bit of a time. It was a government entity, then it was privatized, then it went under concession agreement, then again changed. There has been a different change of hands as well within the utility. I will not go in more detail because the timeline gives a good idea, but this can give you a good idea about what is the present state of a distribution utility. They were not having cables before. In 2003, everything was OHL, and slowly they changed to, as I mentioned, they had a camel corridors. Otherwise, what used to happen, because camels had a tendency to rub their back with the poles, and that used to call the electrocution as well as interruption of a power supply. And so this is their load demand, and this is the bottommost part of Oman, if you know the region. And they had different motivations, and finally they landed up into, they wanted to be the best distribution utility in Oman. They are having 6 distribution utilities, and this is their present vision, mission, because this is definitely needed, but it is a revised one after getting accredited. Safe, reliable, and efficient electricity. So these are the 3 key definitions they are adopting. And this was their present state, earlier state, and this is after adopting the asset management processes. Maximum challenge came within organization from people, which is at the center. Behavioral issues, competencies, limited competencies, and lack of understanding. That was the biggest challenge for them. Then they re-engineered their engineering processes or the procedures. So it takes a time. But let us see what benefit they got it. Just to mention, we have been running a benchmarking forum with many utilities. Here B represented by the Dhofar Power Company. You can see the reduction in SEDI numbers. Yeah, so they have really improved. It is not that only asset management can support, there is a change management and other processes, but it has really helped them. If you look to the SAFI, and losses also they reduce substantially, and their target now by 2025 is 5.5%. They have a lot of rural and urban areas, so definitely it's a challenging point. What is the way forward for us? So I am at the last point now. So way forward definitely depends, as I mentioned, is a top-down approach. So the CEOs, MDs, they have to realize there's a need of an asset management and bring it down. First to buy in the organization, and then they should proceed. So basically they should put a vision that, okay, when we want to get a matured level of, because they know their own challenges, and how to do it, it is the best way. They can tailor it, this roadmap guides, but it cannot say that, okay, you do this exactly, do this, because it is always. But main thing is, possibly you need to start with a pilot. Pilot will also vary from the DISCOM to DISCOM. I can give you some ideas. Pilot can be area specific, pilot can be voltage level specific. If you are not having the data depository of 33 kV, 11 kV assets, then it is better to start a pilot with those asset data. And what do we mean by data is very huge. Data word is very huge. And first and foremost, next point is, you should designate someone as a responsible, establish an asset management organization. I give you a very funny, it is again from DPC. We have been supporting them to establish this asset management system. So my first request to their CEO was that you please assign an asset manager. He assigned one asset manager, but no supporting staff. When I went, he told, he was supposed to attend actually, apologies from him. Otherwise you could have heard very nice stories from him, partly in Arabic words and with English. So what he told, Ashutosh, I am now asset manager, I don't have anyone. Only the consultant and me. What shall I do? I told you, start talking to your assets now. They are your subordinates. When I come next time, you please tell me with how many assets you talked about. So he was laughing on me. I told you, first go and visit all of your primary substations. See the assets, talk to them. Feel your transformers, feel your breakers, talk to them, and once you have talked to them, please let me know what they told you. This was my answer to him. When I went again, because we used to visit, I'm based in Dubai. Basically what he did is, he did a kind of a visual inspection, feeling, some dogs sleeping into the substation, yeah. So that's what is the talking to the assets. So he came up with so many points. All those were improvement points. Now you pass on to your maintenance department, to operation department, that's all. So that is your asset manager. So please assign, then let him talk to the assets. Yesterday I was talking, I really appreciate Mr. Arvind Singh's aspiration. He told that I have not yet visited, and possibly he wants to talk to his assets as well. Yeah, that was really enlightening to me. So that is the first step. Then please incorporate this PDA-CA process into all of your activities. Then you already took a step towards asset management. So that is what I wanted to convey in this. Possibly I extended my time, sorry for it, but I think I kept you a little bit awake. Questions I think we'll take later on. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ashutosh, for those insights. And yeah, you rushed through the last slides, a few of those slides into our memories. One was the slide where you have for the Oman DISCOM the starting point. You remember that cobweb diagram, and then after they implemented, everything actually expanded to the outer core of the diagram. And then also the performance indicators, SIDI, SIFI, losses, tremendously improved. And I mean, that's exactly what I tried to say in the beginning. It's not the certificate which counts in the end, it's the process and then the reward which also comes while implementing all these measures and coming to know all the obstacles and challenges, but also then finding the solutions. And I think that was really impressive to see how big actually the change was in the end. And then also continuously monitor and further improve. And I think in particular regarding the losses, the Indian distribution utilities also know what is the challenge, and yeah, coming down to something like 5%, 5.5%, that's of course very, very laudable. And also there, when I recall it correctly, they started at around 18-20% losses. So in a time span of something like 6 years, they managed that. And I mean, there are good examples in India as well. I think one is sitting just next to me. But yeah, it's definitely worth it, worth in every respect. The utility itself is gaining, and then of course making the best value out of the assets, but also the consumer is gaining. And I think that's also very important, that finally the ones you serve, they actually will feel it, and they can judge then also how good is the performance, and also it would definitely increase the trust in you as the distribution utility, and a good justification why the consumer is actually paying money for the service. Yeah, we go to the final presentation before we start the panel discussion, and I'm really happy that we have Sainat Vandakavi from AWS with us, because he will tell you a bit more what support is already there from the IT and OT perspective. Obviously, there is a lot of data involved, and the complexity is quite high. So one needs definitely also support from that side. And really happy that we can have Sinat speaking on this important aspect. And then after that we will have a discussion.
Okay.
Sinat, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sainath. I'm a solutions architect with Amazon Web Services. And I'll be talking about data-driven asset operations, how it can help, improve asset management, asset operations, and, in the end, improve the asset reliability and availability. So I'll quickly touch upon, what do we mean when we say asset management, right? And then, what are some of the challenges that we face when we talk about asset management, asset operations, asset optimization, all these topics. And then, what are some of the best practices that you can employ when you talk about, improving your asset operations from data perspective, right? And finally, how you can leverage some of the solutions from cloud to improve your asset operations. Okay, so when we talk about power sector, we know it is a utility, it is an asset intensive industry, right? So there are a good number of assets or different types of assets that we have in the utilities industry, or power to be specific, right? We have meters and different types of meters, be it say or digital, mechanical, smart, transformers of different rating. We have say linear assets like cables, we have capacitors, we have say circuit breakers, and the new age assets that we have including say electric vehicle charging stations, or it could be say the energy storage batteries, or it could be the rooftop solar. So different types of assets that we have, right? And managing them, maintaining them is important if we want to keep the lights running, right? So if we say what asset operations actually is, or asset management actually is, right? First thing is what, right? What assets do I have, right? From when did I buy them? From whom did I buy them, right? You're basically maintaining an asset register of all the details of these assets. Next is where are my assets located? So when I say located, are they installed somewhere on the field? Are they actually sitting in the store or the warehouse? And not just about location in terms of geo coordinates, but in terms of the cost centers where they are actually located, right? And the second part of where they are located is in terms of how they are connected as well, right? So there are a lot of connected assets. Say, for example, if we talk about an RTU, right? So RTU is probably connected to a set of feeders. So these two are connected. Similarly, a lot of SIM cards that we use for, say, smart meters, right? So SIM card could be a different asset and a meter is a different asset. So how are these connected? And another way of looking at connectivity is in terms of the network hierarchy, right? So these assets, how are they interconnected? Because failure of one asset could have an effect on many other assets which are connected. So having this kind of a connectivity of the assets location is also very important. Right? Third one is, regarding maintenance. So when is the next maintenance due? Right? So it could be a scheduled maintenance, it could be a predictive maintenance, so different means of predicting or planning a maintenance which is to be done on an asset. And next is, how, right? I mean, now we talked about maintenance, but how do I plan my maintenance? So how do I know what is the current condition of my asset? So how do I predict the chances of its failure, right? And another important point that, one of the earlier speakers also said that, how optimally are the assets used? Are they, overloaded, underloaded, or optimally used? Again, optimally is a subjective term based on the asset, but yes, I mean, we need to know how optimally are those assets used, right? So if we want to look at these operations, then utilities have been trying to do this. Some have excelled, some are trying, some are in the starting phase. But there are different kinds of challenges that the industry is facing. So first and foremost is a limited visibility into the asset performance, right? So this asset performance visibility sometimes could be limited to only the maintenance activities which have been done. And sometimes the details are not probably updated into the system on time. Someone has probably updated it a week later or 10 days later, right? So you're not really getting that visibility of how the asset performance has been, or what were the inspection reports, where are they stored, right? So this visibility is sometimes a challenge. Right. Next one is in terms of, say, firefighting versus strategic improvement. So it's sometimes, run to failure, right? So we wait for the equipment to fail and then we fix it. So there is always a cost to this replacement or repair which happens on this asset. And it is not just the cost of replacement of the asset or repair of the asset. It is also the opportunity loss which happens. Say we could not, turn on or off a circuit breaker on time, right? So there would obviously be an impact on the consumers who are impacted, or the energy which was supposed to be delivered and revenue generated out of it. So all this put together is definitely a loss to the utility. Right? And next one is about the extended time of correction. And the reason being that there could be multiple applications or multiple systems, multiple data sets running at different places, and these are probably not integrated, right? So what happens is the time to take a corrective action actually increases. You have the data, or probably sometimes have a lot of data, so you're not able to identify which is the important data point out of it, and the actual action which is to be taken to fix the asset is getting delayed. Right? So these are some of the challenges that are typically faced, not just in the power industry, but across other industries as well. So if you want to look at this, and how can data-driven asset operations help, right? So some important aspects that you should definitely keep in mind is, one, in terms of data access. So it is important to get the data from the new and legacy systems. Over time, multiple systems are implemented in utilities. So some systems might be having an old set of data, some systems might be having a new set of data, and there could be more IoT-based systems coming up. But bringing all this together is something which is important. Next one is in terms of data management. So data management starts with the asset registers, which actually has the base details of each and every asset. But over time, you see that the data accumulates in large quantities, right? So especially if we talk about, say, the metering data which comes, or the SCADA data that comes, or any other IoT sensors, like, it could be a temperature sensor or any other sensors that we install. Over time, this time series data expands so much that it becomes a large volume. So how do you manage this data is something that you should plan. And next is in terms of scale, right? So the asset management systems, optimization systems, or workforce management systems per se, they scale over time, right? So you might be starting with a particular type of an asset. Tomorrow you might be expanding it to different types of assets. Or today you have, say, 1,000 transformers installed. But with the load growth, obviously there would be increase in, say, the transformers or the cables, all the assets which are there. So whichever asset management systems that you implement, they should be scalable enough to handle that, additional load which would be coming up in future. It should not happen that, my asset base has increased, so I'll probably have to implement a new system to do this, right? So whatever you are doing should be scalable enough to handle what is coming in the future. And next one is in terms of real-time decision making. So when we talk about, say, data-driven decisions, it may not always happen that, data comes from a device on the field into the application, you analyze it, you take a decision, and then you take a corrective action. So it may be too late by the time you do that, right? So implementing edge-level analytics or decision making is also something that you can look at. And that could probably be only for those critical assets for which you can't really afford any kind of a downtime. And last but not the least, security. So security in terms of the devices which are there on the field, how they are communicating, how they are sending the data. Is it an authorized device which is sending the data? How am I storing the data? Is it encrypted? Who can access it? So different types of security measures that need to be considered when we are managing this data related to the assets. So now, what should be done is in terms of democratizing access to data, and you're also laying the foundation to digitize your asset operations in the future. So you may not be starting everything from day one, right? So you might first build an asset register, then you are starting to monitor the data, and as a next step, then you probably get into analyzing this data, and probably after that, you might be getting into, say, a real-time analytics of this data. So it could be a step-by-step, but laying the foundation is something which is very important. So organizing and storing data, this is something that I covered. Next one is in terms of having a near real-time view of important metrics. So if you know what was, say, the average loading on a transformer on a particular phase yesterday, it may not really help you today, right? But if you have a near real-time visibility of how the current, say, 15-minute running average loading of a transformer is, so you might actually take some corrective action immediately before something fails there. Right? So calculating some of these metrics in near real time will be important for those critical assets, and especially if you prioritize them based on the impact a failure of that asset would cause, then you should definitely look at some of these parameters. Right? Third one is streamlining the IT process, bringing the data together from these systems is important, and at the same time, not just bringing the data, but also aligning the business process between the users accessing those systems or using those systems. So aligning those business processes is also important. Next is, like I said, a foundation for a higher level solution. So you may not be building everything on day one, but it is important that you look at the flexibility that is available so that you build further more, say, use cases, solutions on top of the data that you are gathering on the assets. And then basically define the outcomes that you are looking at, right? So it could be outcomes which could be phase-wise planned, some of the outcomes that we are planning for today, some probably 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, and you might also look at, which are those use cases that I want to develop myself, or I would want to probably look at solutions which are readily available, right? So these are some of the aspects that you should consider. Now, if we have to, take some actions on how the assets are performing, right? So one way of doing it is to building a central repository, and Mr. Ashutosh also mentioned this in one of the questions he asked you all, right? So do we have a central repository of where all this data is lying? Because only SCADA sometimes may give you a full visibility of how an asset is performing, or only metering may not be able to give you a full visibility of how an asset is performing, right? So in order to do that, you need to contextualize the data. There could be some static data, there could be some, say, time series data. You need to bring this all together and then do some more analytics to identify what could be the areas of improvement, right? So if you look at all these systems on the left, they have different types of data sets related to the assets. Like, a GIS would have a connectivity between assets which will help you identify the impact of failure of one particular asset on other assets. Similarly, workforce management would have probably the photos that the field workforce take on the field, which you could probably use for some image analysis as well. Right? So bringing all of this together into a kind of a data lake can help you further build many other use cases to identify, what is the asset performance, what is the asset failure analysis, or what could be asset loading predictions, for example. So a lot of other use cases is something that you can build over in the future. So now if we talk about, say, how can cloud help, improving the asset operations, there are various ways of doing it. So one first way could be in terms of, say, building those IoT based solutions which can actually receive data from the end devices over, say, standard protocols like MQTT or REST or any other standard protocol. So you get the data and you store them in a, say, a scalable storage layer which could actually have both structured, unstructured data, time series data, so different kinds of data formats which I mentioned in the previous slides. An important point is we should not land into a situation where we think that, oh, my storage is full, I'll have to delete all my maintenance data of, say, past 3 years or 2 years or 5 years, right? So you should have something which can actually help you build large volumes of data so that you know what kind of models you can build on top of that and then derive analytics out of it. Next one is in terms of, say, transforming the data, right? So there are different types of assets. All of them will not have the same set of attributes, right? So transforming the data is important if we want to perform certain type of analytics. Or for a particular type of assets, there would be different manufacturers, different models, and all of them may not be giving the same attributes again. But if we identify one type of asset, you need to bring that into a common model if we want to build more analytics on top of it. Third is in terms of contextualizing. So contextualizing in the sense you get a 360-degree view of a particular asset, right? So how the maintenance has been, which is probably stored somewhere else, what have been the readings in the past, say 2 months, 1 week. So that would probably be in a different system. But bringing all of this together will actually help you contextualize and take a decision if I have to take an immediate action or if I can plan a maintenance activity 1 week, 2 weeks down the line. And four, in terms of analysis, we talk a lot about AI/ML, right? So there are also solutions where you don't really need AI/ML expertise to do, asset performance analysis. So there are tools which can learn by themselves based on the past data and identify anomalies, identify abnormalities in the data and tell you if any action needs to be taken, right? And lastly, all the analysis out of it, some kind of action needs to be taken, right? So it probably could be a work order to a field personnel, or it could be a planning activity, or it could be a vendor who needs to be called for inspection. So there could be different actions which would be needed, which also is part of this, say, action which needs to be taken on the data. So this is a reference architecture. I'll not go into detail, but if you were to build, say, asset monitoring optimization solution on cloud. So this is a reference architecture that you can look at. So on the left-hand side top is where you see some of the data sources which we already have, like it could be SCADA, it could be metering. And on the left-hand side bottom are the end devices which are also sending a lot of data. Right? And on the right-hand side is a different set of systems that can be used, starting from, say, asset monitoring, then, say, asset analysis, then, you're integrating with external systems, you're building a data lake. So there is a lot of, analysis or action that you can do on this data. But important point is you don't have to do everything at one stretch. It can go phase by phase. So the different icons that you see here, so you can plan how different actions work together, different messages flow together, or analysis is done and outcome is delivered. So that is it from my side. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Sainath. And actually, we spoke also a bit during the days here, and I learned that you are actually, let's say, not with your present employer all the time. You have worked a lot in distribution utilities before, and you know the system quite well, so you really know what you speak, right? Nevertheless, I would say you have presented us a very nice insight what can be done if all those steps have been followed. But I think the challenge is also that most of the IT and OT functionalities have been acquired over time without actually anyone thinking that they would have to communicate and cooperate with each other in order to achieve such a nice system and getting all your data on a fingertip and being able to let now even AI do the analytics for you. And I think that's a big challenge. It's actually the topic of another report, which we are not launching today, but we will find a good opportunity for that. That's exactly the IT-OT integration. How can it be done? How to overcome such challenges? A lot of proprietary solutions are there. How to actually make them interoperable. But yeah, as I said, that's another report and another event. I'm very happy that we have Pedi Sumantu, the Vice President of the Head Office of the Research Management Development of PLN Distribution Asset Processing from PT PLN Indonesia with us, because He is charged with the implementation of the ISO 55000 in that company since 2021, and he has been given, I understood, quite a tight deadline to implement that. And yeah, I learned also that Indonesia is a little bit different from India. There is only one distribution company for the entity of Indonesia, but as you all know, Indonesia comprises of 500 plus islands, I think even many more than that. So a lot of assets distributed all over the place and not so easily reachable. So this presents its own challenges, and yeah, I'm happy that PD can actually show us and tell us how those challenges look like and how he's going to overcome them. PD, the floor is yours.
So thank you, Mr. Magus. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy can go in this forum. So thank you, Mr. Raji Kumar Pillai, to send letter to PLN. We can go to Odisha. Yeah. I want to explain what asset management to implement it in PLN. So I'm a practitioner on operation asset. Yeah. So asset management. Okay. I want to explain about tools of to recording asset distribution with maximum, yeah, IPM application. Electricity utilities in Indonesia operation by PLN by generation, so transmission, distribution, and retail customer. But now install capacity at generation is 66 gigawatts. So transmission 64.8 thousand kms. So its distribution is about 598,000 kilometers, and customer 52 million. So, and nation Indonesia. PLN have transmission breakthrough, have 4 stream. One stream lean, and 2 stream at green, innovative and customer purpose. So asset management about distribution asset, about digitally breakthrough, and so we come to related asset and for this one is best asset management. I'm a principal like ISO 45. So 6 group of can he explain about strategy and planning, about asset management decision making, and group D and life cycle delivery-nya. Kemudian group 4 asset information, and group 5 of organization and people, and group 6 as risk and review. So we have asset management place policy so from POD. So explain corporate vision, so rule of asset management and policy statement about to asset implementation. Method asset management ini but now become to preventive maintenance. So but now periodic maintenance dealing basis of asset agreement. So that condition is so creation of health index and schedule maintenance and to utilize expression rules of priority maintenance follow-up. This one a maximum to profitable to use recording on my asset distribution. How to recording assets between inputs on process and maximum, and so to output, yeah, we have asset condition, so health index, and so evaluationnya for data analytic with soft tabular and badges on network-based case. On this one, workflow, how to do the on Unity and PLN to recording or inspection about asset. So many departments have to responsibility to make data and so evaluation and go to inspection and execution for maintenance. This one is reporting document about index of asset. So in Maximos, I have dashboards about asset health. So termination condition of loads and asset health index for allocation to maintenance and from maintenance to effectives. So I have leveling to category asset. Have to need to level beginning outsider, beginner, intermediate, expert to expert. So we have to explain to digital distribution material level in this. So thank you. Is my presentation. If any question, I want to Mr. Eman. Thank you for explain this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pidi. And yeah, I think the slide on the dashboard health index, I think many envy you for that. I think that's really nice thing to have. But I'm sure it's also quite a lot of work until you actually get there. And but yeah, very interesting what is happening in Indonesia. And yeah, we will change the session a little bit. I let now Arvind Singh, the CEO of TPSODL, speak a little bit, and then we would open the floor for some questions. So I hope with this, then we would have somehow accommodated for the time which we lost in the beginning, and also still give, let's say, inheritance to the next sessions so that they can also follow the time flow. But yeah, coming back to Arvind, yeah, Tata Power, of course, is a hallmark when it comes to distribution in India. And yeah, Tata has done a lot of great things in Mumbai, Delhi, and now since a bit more than 1 year, you have taken over also the operations in Odisha. And I think during the last sessions yesterday, we heard already a lot of good things which have happened here since Tata took over. But maybe you, as the one who is involved from the beginning, you can tell us also a little bit about your asset management, how you do it, what you may have found when you started, and how you also think you can take it further.
Thank you, Marcus. Morning, everyone. So, when we took over TPSODL on 1st January 2021, we had some idea of what we are getting into because Central Odisha was already functioning for a couple of months. They had taken on 1st of June. But we were directed that within 45 days, we must come up with a capex plan. So within those 45 days, we had to quickly understand the way systems are working, what was available on the ground, what is not available. We also realized that the DISCOM was largely not maintained at all. So everyone used to wait for failure to happen, and then they were pretty good at responding to failures and then put the system back in service. There was shortage of material, the shortage of manpower, especially skilled manpower. So we were fighting on multiple things, procuring material, getting into annual maintenance contracts, and capex, as I said, we submitted to the regulator. He took some time approving that. And within 6 months, we had our AMCs for 33 kV systems, primary substations, right down to the LT network that was in place. And then we prioritized what had to be done. So serious critical equipment like batteries, battery chargers were not functioning. You know what it can do to the system. So made a plan to replace that. You had low ground clearances, public safety risk. The people who were working with us not aware much about safety. So when you try to replace assets or equipment on such a large scale, you land up with too many accidents. So we had to take people through induction training, and that huge workforce of almost 3,000 people we got through AMC. They had to be trained in safety, trained and cross-verify whether they know exactly what is to be done. So as equipment started coming in, we also quickly planned to commission SCADA, and we have a 3-year plan to take all the 248 primary substations on SCADA. SCADA was commissioned within 15 months of our taking over, and today we have 60 stations on SCADA, and we plan to complete 100 by the end of this financial year. So that will be 2 years, 3 months. We have also mapped assets in 1,25,000 consumers in GIS. We plan to do 7 lakh consumers by the end of this year, and the entire 23.5 lakh by next year. So on one hand, while we are replacing assets, IT, OT systems were being put in place, communication links were being made, and I think directionally we know where we want to go. And another problem we had was we didn't have data to assess what exactly was the performance of the DISCOM. So FY23, that is this year, we are making sure that every forced outage, every planned outage, it gets captured, data gets captured, so we can have a baseline for SAIDI, SAIFI, and things like that. So I think considering the fact that by this March we will have GIS in place, the systems, SCADA will be in place. I think CapEx, of course, the vesting order itself says that we are supposed to spend 1,166 crores in 5 years. That's a well laid out plan. Things have started improving. Some challenges still remain, enhancing the skill level of our own employees. We, of course, we have 2,000 people erstwhile at DISCOM, another 700-800 we have hired over a period of last 1 or 2 years. So make sure that all of them reach a stage where they know exactly what should they be monitoring. We have also introduced monitoring of operating parameters in these 248 substations. While every station is going to go on SCADA very soon, or not very soon, probably next 2 years, but we must have people filling up forms so that we have enough data to understand what can probably fail next. Transformers, leaking transformers was the norm. In Tata Power, you don't let oil get mixed with the groundwater. These things are unheard of these days, but it was a common sight. We have put an end to that. So lots of working with the OEMs, working with the contractors, placing rate contracts for repairs, maintenance. So I think we have reached a stage where we know exactly what we want to do. And we're not there yet. So everything that has been talked about asset management, we also commission SAP. So all my CapEx happens through the PS module. So we also had an auditor looking at the asset, physical verification of assets. So we know exactly what's our physical base there. We also have the plant maintenance module in place. So all major assets already mapped there. So we have an annual maintenance plan. We know what is to be done. So I think coming 1 or 2 years, we can say we have brought the DISCOM in a very fast forward mode to using all the learnings of Mumbai and Delhi. Delhi, everybody knows what we have been doing over the last 20 years. But only thing we did everything that they have done and probably more in a much shorter time. Time was of essence and supported hugely by the regulator and the government themselves. So, you know, in Odisha, every time you have a cyclone, a lot of funding comes from the government. So you don't have to look at the capex and load the consumer directly. So with all the help and all the support, I think we are at a place where we can say we have the right amount of money, O&M sanctioned by the regulator, capex sanctioned by the regulator, the right kind of people, skills, and we keep developing on the safety skills and other skills. And I think in the next 1.5 years, we will be where we want it to be. So that's the thing that we have done in the last 2 years. We still haven't completed 2 years. So that will be doing on 1st January.
Thanks a lot. I think that asked for a little bit of applause for the successes. And also wish you all the best, but I'm confident, I don't have to wish, I just have to say I'm coming back in 2 years and I'm sure you will even overfulfill what you just said. We had a nice round of presentations, a lot of information also. Tiran started with the ISO 55000 family, what it is about. Ashutosh went a little further and also brought in some implementation issues and also a few insights from implementing it in Oman. Then Sainat showed us also how our technology, in particular IT, OT, can help and also how helpful the cloud may be in managing the assets. And Bedi also informed us how it has been done in Indonesia. I forgot an important aspect of it, and maybe it's worth mentioning it because we discussed it before. There is a small trick maybe how to enforce the implementation in your company a bit faster, and that's the CFO actually is in charge for implementing the ISO 55000 process. That may help in doing that. And yeah, we heard a lot from Arvind on the success story here in Odisha. So now I would like to open the floor for a few questions you may have to the 5 panelists here. And then we can hand over back to ISGF for the next session. So the floor is yours. Can we get a mic, please, to the person over there?
Good morning to everybody. Mainly in the asset management various tools, in one of the architecture, there were so many different islands of information or IT tools basically, SCADA, EMS, GIS, IoT-based solution, and some data structure database also. Most of these solutions are developed by different organization with very specific target and focus of creating a value or some output that serves the purpose. The biggest challenge that we face is a change management. Now, instead of reducing or optimizing our resource utilization, it creates a different type of problem. It's need a huge manpower just to maintain a change in all the different tools. And one biggest limitation it creates is we are not able to utilize the natural intelligence. And we are talking about artificial intelligence. So I just wanted to know, is there any work or anybody has a solution to have a standard single source of truth for all these different solutions, metadata structure solution, so that we can utilize a natural intelligence of information and it can give us an optimum solution for the outage management and all other relevant asset management parameters. Is there any solution or anybody is working on this part, any company, any organization or any utility who has who has worked out any solution? I know that Tata Delhi has done some work in ADMS part, but still that wasn't in a place as it is desired. So I just wanted to know if anybody has any solution on that part.
I said already that we have another report on IT-OT integration in the making, but perhaps Sainat, would you like to make it a short on that?
If your question is that is there one solution which can handle all of this, as far as I know, no.
It's not, I'm not talking about one solution. I'm talking about a single source of truth for all the solutions. So like SCADA has its own data structure.
Right.
GIS has its own data structure. SAP has its own data structure. Likewise, if you talk about data lake, then it will be another one. And moreover, there are many different solutions like IoT. Every manufacturer has its own firmware and it doesn't communicate with the solution created for the same purpose with a different device or different sensors. So we need even though we have so many different standard protocols, standards that is basically meant to unify all this data structure.
So a data lake approach could be one of the ways in which you can achieve this, but you said it right that each of these applications were purpose built to achieve one particular objective. Right, so those systems will keep running, but you'll have to pick those specific data sets and bring out into a common data lake which can hold different types of data. So it could be SCADA data, it could be say a metering data, it could be say ERP data. You may not want to pull everything out of those systems, but at least you should be able to identify that this is the outcome that I am achieving, and in order to achieve this, these are those data sets I need to pick from each of those 5 or 6 or 10 systems and put it into a data lake. So once you have that into a data lake, then you can further build any other use case that you plan to. You start with 1 or 2 use cases, then expand more. And future, if some more data sets are needed, you again bring them back into a data lake. So that could be one way of doing it.
But the problem here is that we are also talking about cyber security, and that forces us to make every system unique and like SCADA can't use a data lake data again. The historical data, if I store it into a data lake, then that data I can't retrieve back into the SCADA and for analysis or any historical data relations analysis. So likewise, each system is being worked out differently and that's create a problem.
Yes, so protocols would definitely be different. So in one of the slides that I mentioned, I said the integration from, say, device to application and application to application. So these are two integration aspects that need to be kept in mind. So one single type of integration protocol may not work for, say, SCADA or metering or ERP or GIS. You'll obviously need to have multiple integration protocols to bring in the data there. And again, one OEM may not be able to give that, right? So it might happen that you might have to plug in some more, say, adapters from different parties to bring in the data into a one common place. Security, yes, it's a very important factor, and data and transit, data and rest is something that we talk about, right? So even on cloud, there are different services, solutions which we employ to define that security posture, which is needed for data in transit or in terms of storage, be it encrypting databases, be it encrypting files which are stored in a data lake. So different ways of ensuring security.
Yeah, the report of IT-OT integration I mentioned comes more or less to similar conclusions what Sainath just said, just to also tell you that. But Tiran, you wanted to say something. Do you have the holy grail to that problem?
I wish I had the holy grail, but if I understand your question correctly, right, you're saying there are multiple systems that have different data or sometimes even the same data parameter. So you're looking for also for that single source of truth. So one of the things that we do in Europe and that may be coming also towards Asia as well now is having a common information model, SIM. There are 3 standards for it now, whereby we describe how you can make the different systems interoperable. And of course, if you have legacy systems, because you will have legacy systems, you will not completely change that systems. You do what's called an adapter on top of your system, and then you create a way to communicate between the different systems using the same data parameter. The same way to describe this bottle will be in system A and B. That's one part of moving towards this. The other part you talked about was the single source of truth. Like I mentioned before, 2 different systems may be obtaining the same data or in a different manner. So you have to figure out which one will be called the SSOT. And that's where you need to have a good data architecture mapped out and then specify, okay, with SCADA, this is what I consider to be the single source of truth. So let's take an example, right? So you have your asset. Let's call it a transformer. You have data coming in, let's say, from your SCADA system regarding the transformer, but you also have the geographical data that's maybe going into your GIS. Right? So what you have to decide then is the geographical data, so the longitude, the latitude, the single source of truth will be coming from the GIS. The other operational data that's coming from the SCADA system will be then the single source of truth for that system. So you have to make those decisions and you have to map it out. That's one. 2, you talked about cybersecurity. And that's quite a hot topic today because utilities globally are being attacked. If you look into, just Google utility cybersecurity, you'll find multiple articles in the last 6 months. So what you do there is, of course, you have what's called the demilitarized zone and the militarized zone, where certain systems you say, I have a certain level of protection, I don't take them on the cloud, I keep them on-premise, and certain applications or certain data parameters that you classify according to a cybersecurity standard can be in the demilitarized zone. So that can then be cloud-based. And this is what utilities globally are doing, where they're making those key decisions to keep their data secure. If you want, you can always find me afterwards and I can draw it out for you on a piece of paper.
Yeah, thank you. I have just one more question or a topic where I just want to know whether anybody is working on that part or not. That one is the time synchronized network or time synchronized data capturing. May it be a smart meter or any ID or IoT device or any SCADA sensors or application. Why I'm telling, I will just give you a bit background. In Delhi, I'm from BSES Rajdhani Power. The challenge with our power scheduling is that we have been given only a plus minus 8 megawatt. And just to know what is my real time role at any time in a day, we need to integrate around 390 different meters values. Now it is just impossible for us to know really what is demand at any moment in a day. That's mainly because each meter, most of these meters are not time synchronized. And it is really very difficult for us to synchronize at any time because most of the meter structures, basically the firmwares, are not designed that way. With a single meter out, sometimes some big feeders or any change in the network that results, that gives us a huge error in our SCADA integrated single the cumulative values. And that's make a different type of challenge. Now we are talking about smart metering everywhere throughout the India. And most of this company or the most of the forums I have attended, people are presenting that with this smart meter, we are going to solve all the problems, may it be the forecasting or theft or so many other things. We are going to derive a lot of new values that will help us to sort it out. But nobody is talking about time synchronize. Unless we synchronize all the meters very accurately, that the value provided by meters, individually it may be valuable. But for maintaining a network or for maintaining a scheduling or any other forecasting, that will be of no use. So anybody is working on that part globally or anywhere. I just want to know if anybody has input on that part. Time stamping is okay, sir, but we have observed that sometimes meters drift out. Any wrong dates or any wrong configuration parameter makes this meter data out of sync with the rest of the meters.
I think we could have a new session on this topic. I think it expands a little bit the range we could cover here. I have to ask the organizers, should we have closed? Yeah, because we need to also cater for the subsequent question. I thank the audience for bearing with us. I hope it was true that it's not a boring topic. It's actually a quite interesting topic, covering many aspects. And I hope also that our great panel has actually been able to deliver a few messages to you which let you think about asset management, ISO 55000, and perhaps how to go about it in your utilities. Thank you very much, and it was great to have that first session this morning with you, and I hand back to the